Welcome out tonight. I did want to start. Tonight is session 18, and today is November the 15th, 2022. Donald Trump just announced that he's a candidate for president again for the next presidential election. So that guarantees at least one thing. The next 2 years are going to be interesting. Oh, we thought the last 2 years, but we're kind of used to things just being kind of wacky, aren't we, the last few years? So the next few years may seem like normal. Just the way it's been. Anyway, I wanted to start tonight by thanking those of you who have been coming to most of these sessions in person. It does make a big difference to me. I said when we started these sessions, the first of this year, I envision myself at times being here all by myself, just starting the camera, talking to an empty room, knowing that I'd be sending it out online for others to watch. We started this largely as an outreach effort for this community. So I felt the Lord laying it on my heart. So I told him, if I'm by myself, I'm by myself. I did not put any pressure on any of the members of Liberty, no expectations. I just wanted to do this because I felt prompted to do it and leave the results in God's hands. And whoever wants to attend can attend. Whoever wants to watch online can. I hope it helps some of my fellow pastors in their studies. Hope it opens up the Word of God to all of us. I do appreciate that some who have been watching online have recommended it, shared the link to other people across the country, so that some of these are being watched by people in the Philippines, people in most other states, all over this country and others. The Bible says several different places in several different ways, cast your bread on the waters and they'll come back to you eventually. So that's kind of how I'm looking at these. Humanly, I certainly wish by the banners out front, by us promoting it on Facebook, and, so the word is getting out. There's a lot of people being made aware of these sessions. The human side of me wishes the room had been filled by now with people showing some interest, wanting to know more about the end times, and being spiritually stimulated in the Word of God. But that's not my job, is to present the Word of God and pray that God will bless taking it to the hearts and minds of other people. So you should have two documents. The one document is the timeline worksheet that has the 3 columns: what happens in the start, what happens in the middle, what happens at the end. We did spend an entire session on what happens in the middle. We spent an entire session on what happens at the start. And now we're combining the first 2 columns, showing how they work together. Because my goal in these particular sessions is what I'm calling continuity with anchor points. That's kind of how I'm looking at this. So there's a continuity through these 7 years, but there's certain things in here that are anchor points. For instance, Daniel 9:27 is an anchor point. So the first part of the verse is the first part of the 7 years. The middle part of the verse is the middle of the 7 years. And the last of the verse is the end of the 7 years. So that one verse takes us through all of the 7 years. And there's a statement made about each part of the 7 years. That's an anchor point. So you start building around it. We're going to get to 1131 tonight. That's another anchor point. So I drew an arrow up to the anchor because 1131 speaks about the abomination of desolation and the breaking of the covenant and the start of the great tribulation. So I drew a line back to the primary mention of the Great Tribulation, the time of Jacob's trouble. And Daniel borrows from Jeremiah and talks about it in 11:31 and especially 12:1. We'll read those when we get to that. And then I draw an arrow to the New Testament verses that are drawn from that same passage from 11:31 and 12:1. So this idea of continuity, it's always moving forward, it's flowing toward a destination. But along the way, he drives down stakes to let us know this event happens at this point, and then you can build everything around it. So I also added in blue above the timeline that Daniel 11:21 through 30 is the first half of the 7 years. Daniel 11:31 through 45 is the last half of the 7 years. So I had planned on, we dealt with the other document last week, session 17, End Times Bible Study handout, 12 key points from the first 2 columns of the timeline worksheet. And we went through the first 6. Then I said tonight would go through the next 6, 7 through 12. And we will, but I'm not going to do it like I did last week. I'm not going to go through each of these because we've already, I think, can you get each of those for Jolie? They're right up here in front. They're right up here in front. I meant to ask everyone if they had those, both of those, one of each of those. Everybody else have those? So session 17 and 18 are the 12 key points of the first 2 columns. We've already dealt with some of number 7 through 12, and we're going to deal with some more of them in detail in future sessions. So I thought it might be good tonight just to really make it simple to where we can all follow along and read together and make comments along the way, maybe raise some questions, is to take Daniel 11:21 through 11:45, the rest of the chapter, read through it, a running commentary, and it's going to cover the whole 7 years. And this passage doesn't get enough attention. Daniel 9, Daniel 2, Daniel 12, Daniel 11. One reason why it doesn't get enough attention, most commentators will say that it's mostly about our history. In other words, in the near future from Daniel, they will say that it's mostly about Antiochus during the time of the Maccabees. They'll say it's about Titus in the time of the Romans. But I've come to the conclusion that starting in verse 21, it's talking about the final Antichrist. And I base that on some of the verses that lead up to this. We'll go back and read them briefly before we come back to chapter 11. Back in 8:26, now these are all leading up to chapter 11. In all these visions, the angel keeps reminding Daniel about something really important. 8:26, and the visions of the evenings and mornings, which was told, is true. Therefore, seal up the vision, which chapter 12 talks about the sealing of the vision. And we'll see it clearly is talking about the end of the age at the return of Christ. Therefore, seal up the vision, for it refers to many days in the future. So, this is language in prophecy that's kind of saying, I'm not talking about the near future. I'm talking about the distant future, the end of the age. Not just the next ruler, not just the next empire, because there's going to be succeeding rulers and empires, building up to a final 10-toed, 10-horned, 10-nation confederation headed up by what's called the little horn, the Antichrist. So all of these successive empires and rulers have some characteristics mentioned in chapter 11, but is trying to drive us to the final expression of a Gentile ruler and his empire oppressing the people of God, Israel. Now, in chapter 10 of verse 1, in the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, we went through chapter 10 last session, a message was revealed to Daniel, whose name was also called Belteshazzar. The message was true, but the appointed time was long. So again, this language of I'm not talking about short future, I'm talking about long future. And it's appointed time. It's not just rulers as they come along, empires as they come along. It's an appointed time, an elected time. And that's often language connected with the final 7 years and the final antichrist. Appointed time. Then in chapter 10, verse 14, now I have come to make you understand. This is Gabriel talking to Daniel. I have come to make you understand what will happen to your people in the latter days. For the vision refers to many days yet to come. So again, not just the next main ruler, not just the next main empire, but way down there at the end is what I'm talking about. To show this conclusively in chapter 12 and verse 9, he said, "Go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end." I think that's clearly talking about the soon time leading to the return of Christ. And the idea of they're sealed up carries us right over to Revelation and the unsealing of the 7 sealed scroll. So down there in the future, Revelation and the 7 seals. So this idea of sealing and unsealing is definitely at the time of the end. And then verse 13, the book of Daniel closes out, "But you go your way till the end, for you shall rest and will arise to your inheritance at the end of the days." When is the resurrection? When will he receive his inheritance? At the return of Christ and the resurrection, down there at the very end. So all of these verses are simply like Gabriel reminding Daniel, I'm not talking about your lifetime or the next lifetime or the next. I'm talking about, that's why Jesus in Matthew 24:15 said, stop right here, go to Daniel, and you'll get a lot of answers about what I'm talking about in Matthew 24. So anyone studying Matthew 24 needs to spend a lot of time in Daniel. Because Jesus basically is saying in Matthew 24, I'm just going to hit the high points. If you want to know a lot more details, go to Daniel. I already was back there with him, telling him what to write down. So it's really Jesus speaking through Daniel, and then, 500 some years later, speaking it himself to his disciples. But it's the same words. But he told them that Daniel had a lot more detail. So go back and read and understand. So let's start in 11:21. And to put it in context, verse 20, there shall arise in his place one who imposes taxes on the glorious kingdom, but within a few days he shall be destroyed, but not in anger or in battle. So we're going to find out that this Antichrist is he's less of a warrior, even though he does include war and battles and killings and so forth. You have to, if you're going to grab all the power. But he comes in politically. He comes in peaceably. He comes in deceitfully. He comes in kind of an unknown figure. He's not a major world figure. He's not from royalty. Doesn't have a bloodline connection to a famous family. He's kind of an unknown in the shadows. And evidently, this person in verse 20 is going to be destroyed, whoever it is. This is the one that the Antichrist fills the vacuum and takes over from. He'll be destroyed, but not in anger or in battle. So whoever destroys him is going to destroy him politically. Or a big scandal. However he destroys him, it's not going to be in anger or in battle. And in his place. Now here's where we start the Antichrist. Shall arise a vile person. Now, we've already been told earlier in Daniel, for instance, back in chapter 8, in verse 11, this is the little horn of chapter 8, verse 9, that many people try to make Antiochus or Titus or some other ruler leading up. But this little horn back in chapter 7, it's easy to make this little horn the Antichrist. And out of one of them came a little horn, which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, toward the glorious land. He grew up to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and some of the stars to the ground and trampled them. This is kind of reminiscent of Revelation 12, when Satan is cast out of heaven and brings some of the stars with him, and he tramples on humans and on governments. It's that kind of language. He even exalted himself as high as the prince of the host. And by him the daily sacrifices were taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. That's the abomination of desolation. And the taking away of the sacrifices, that happens here in the middle of the week, where he breaks the covenant, stops the daily sacrifices, commits the abomination of desolation. But I'm really talking about his character. He exalts himself as high as the prince of the host. So back to chapter 11:21. In his place shall arise a vile person. So this is the Antichrist. He's full of pride, he's full of arrogance, but he's able to hide it in deceit. Then this idea of arise. What do you think of he rises up? Immediately, you should be thinking about Revelation 13:1. This beast out of the sea, that it says he rises up out of the sea. And he takes over these 10 nations. He takes over 3 of them, and then the other 7 give him his power willingly. Evidently, 3 of them are kind of reluctant, so he has to be a little bit more forceful or political with them. But this beast rises up out of the sea. This is just Daniel's description of what John describes in Revelation 13:1. To whom they will not give the honor of royalty. He'll not be of royal blood or of noble blood or well-known or powerful nation, but he shall come in peaceably. But that's how he destroys the guy back in verse 20. He'll seize the kingdom. So he grabs hold of it as peaceably, but he sees an opportunity. He sees a vacuum. He sees a way to ruin this previous man, take over his position, and then from that build that coalition of 10 nations. So it is a seizing, but it's peaceably. That's how he starts. With the force of a flood, they shall be swept away from before him and be broken. At least 3 of them. And also the prince of the covenant, which is probably that man back in verse 20. See, he sweeps him away somehow. And after the league, see, this is called, as we'll see later, a holy covenant. In 9:27, he confirms a covenant. So the other places it's called a covenant because the word covenant in the Bible has like a holy connotation to it, a spiritual. It's from God. It's an agreement between God and humans. Covenant is a real special Bible word. But to him, it's much less than that. It's just a treaty. It's just a league. It's just an evil necessity. It's just a political requirement for me to get a foothold. So this prince of the covenant, verse 22, evidently was the one who got the process started. And now this vile person will be able to rise up, take his place, destroy him, however it destroys him, and sweeps away this prince of the covenant and takes his position. And that's how he gets his foothold. After the league is made with him, he shall act deceitfully. So now that he's in, here's where his deceit really begins. This is why Jesus tells us to go to Daniel, because in Matthew 24, when it says he shall act deceitfully, Jesus brings this up 4 times. Be not deceived, be not deceived, be not deceived. All the way through Matthew 24, 4 times. Paul grabs a hold of Daniel making this statement and says in 2 Thessalonians 2 and 3, let no man deceive you by any means. So why does Jesus and Paul grab hold of what Daniel says, or Gabriel says to Daniel, and highlight it? Because this man will be the master of deceit. For he shall come up and become strong with a small number of people. So small nations, over there in the Middle East, all those nations surrounding Israel right now, many of them are small, they're kind of powerless. They may, be able to get a lot of financial support because they're mostly poor and they're described as being oppressed by the Jews and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of people give them money. But he's going to become strong, but he doesn't start strong. He becomes strong with a small number of people. Those three horns that he overthrows. And then the other 7, making 10 total. He shall enter peaceably. So he's going to be known first as a man of peace, even though Gabriel tells Daniel that underneath this peaceable person is a deceitful, vile person. There's been this is not hard to understand, is it? I mean, we're living in a time where many politicians have a great ability to make people believe that they're just the most wonderful person in the world. Then you find out later that they're creeps. Just the way it is, human nature. He shall enter peaceably even into the richest places of the province. So we're still in the first half, the first 3.5 years. And he shall do what his fathers have not done, nor his forefathers. He shall disperse among them the plunder. So as he's gaining his power, what does he do? What every good politician does. He starts buying people. He starts contributing to their charities. He starts contributing to their political runs for power. And so he gains a lot of friends that way. He shall disperse among them the plunder, the spoil, and the riches. He shall devise his plans against the strongholds, but only for a time. He shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south. So he starts out up in the north, Syria, Turkey, Iraq, one of those north of Israel, and the king of the south, so the Arabs, whether it be Egypt or Libya, one of those countries down there, Saudi Arabia. Because this is all built on, not to go into too much detail, but this principle is all built on when Alexander the Great died, his empire was divided among 4 generals. And the king of the north was Seleucid, and the king of the south was Ptolemy. So the king of the north and the king of the south fought against each other all the time. Well, he's taken that same principle and carrying it down to the end times. And we see over there now, even among the Muslim countries, the northern Muslim countries, especially like Iran, they hate Saudi Arabia. They want to destroy Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia tries to stay friendly with the U.S. to protect them against Iran, but they're both Muslim countries. So there's something about the northern old Persian-based countries, the southern Arab-based countries, they've always hated each other. Just because they're Muslims doesn't mean they, are friends. So this ancient clash between the north and the south of Israel is still coming into play during the tribulation period. So he shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south with a great army. Now, this could be Saudi Arabia with all their money and the United States helping them. It could be Egypt, because Egypt and Saudi Arabia are two of the more, even though they're rabid Muslim countries, they're two of the more neutral countries now toward Israel. Why? Because it's good business to do business with Israel. So they're less hostile. Not Iran. They don't care about any of that. They want to destroy Israel. They're very public about it. So he's trying to get everyone on his side. And in this case, it's going to come to battle. The king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great mighty army, but he shall not stand, for they shall devise plans against him. And a lot of this is about the Holy Covenant, this 7-year agreement that has divided the Muslim world. And that's easy for us to see. Any peace agreement with Israel and allowing them to have access to the Temple Mount and to Jerusalem and to their own land is going to divide those countries over there. We've already seen it divide those countries over there. What, little treaties have come along in our lifetime. There's not general agreement between those countries. But he shall not stand, for they shall devise plans against him. Yes, those who eat of the portion of his delicacies shall destroy him. His army shall be swept away. Many shall fall down slain. So the king of the north, whoever that is going to win this conflict. And it's just going to gain him even more power. Both these kings shall be bent on evil. They shall speak lies at the same table. Now, we don't know if they're lying toward each other or because of his victory over the kings, the group of the south. They now come together and devise evil against Israel. How can we break this covenant and destroy them? We've made them a lot of promises. They are prospering. They're at peace. So maybe we can secretly figure out a way to break this and go against them. They shall speak lies at the same table, which is what happens all the time in the world right now in negotiations, so it's no different. But it shall not prosper, for the end will still be at the appointed time. While returning to his land with great riches, because he's won the victory, now his heart will be moved against the Holy Covenant. Why? Because now he's much more powerful, wealthier, has more influence in that whole region than he did when he started out. He hated the Holy Covenant right from the start, but he couldn't do much about it. He came into a covenant that was already in the process of being agreed to. He finds a way to overthrow the architect of that, gains his foothold, and begins in deceit. That's why he talks about deceitfully. Right from the start, he starts trying to figure out, how can I break this covenant? I hate it. So he shall do damage and return to his own land. But now he's gaining enough power and influence to maybe make an attempt. At the appointed time. That's really important, isn't it? See, he thinks he's manipulating all this. He thinks he's scheming, he's planning, he's plotting, he's working his way to break this covenant. It's God's appointed time. God's the one that set this 7 years up. God's the one that said this is what's going to happen right in the middle. God said this is what's going to happen the last 3.5 years. God's going to say, it's time. But God's in control of all of it. It's the appointed time. While returning to his land with great riches, his heart shall be moved against the holy covenant. He shall do damage to return to his own land, wherever it is, Syria, Turkey, wherever it is north of Israel. At the appointed time, he shall return and go toward the south. Now this is, I think, for the purposes we might see to now go against Israel or capture Jerusalem. But it shall not be like the former or the latter, for ships from Cyprus, we've read this before, Chittim or Cyprus, from the west, Western naval powers, shall come against him. So even though he's won a regional victory and has consolidated a regional power base, the Western nations are going to probably say, now you're going too far. You guys fought against each other. You worked it out. You won your victory. That's one thing. But now we see your plan is to destroy Israel. And evidently there's going to be still enough support of Israel in the middle of the 7 years to at least slow him down, stop him in this initial effort. Ships from Cyprus, from the west, shall come against him. Therefore he shall be grieved. It may not even come to a battle. They may present a strong show of force. He'll say, I don't think I can really overcome. I see I don't have as much support as I thought I did. I'm jumping the gun a little bit. So he pulls back because it doesn't even seem like there's a battle that takes place here. Therefore he shall be grieved and return in rage. So this just makes him even madder against the holy covenant and do damage. So he shall return, lick his wounds, plan for another day, and show regard for those who forsake the holy covenant. Forces shall be mustered by him. And here's verse 31. That's why I have 11:31 right here. It's an anchor point. This is the abomination of desolation, the breaking of the holy covenant. They shall defile the sanctuary fortress. That's the temple, the city. Then they, the people of the prince, as it said in 9:27, the people of the prince to come. So his armies, his people, his political figures, they shall take away the daily sacrifices and place there the abomination of desolation. So that's the two events that happen in the middle of the week. Now, if you look at the session 17 and 18 End Times Bible Study handout, number 6, I say Daniel 11:30, he becomes enraged against the covenant, but he lacks what point 7 gives him. See, the ships of Cyprus came against him and stopped him. But something happens between verse 30 and 31, and I think it's point number 7. Revelation 13:1-4. Let's just go over and read that real quick. How am I doing on time? Okay, I think we're pretty good. Revelation 13, verse 1, I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up. That's what we saw in Daniel 11:21. Out of this sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, because he had taken over 3. On his horns 10 crowns, on his heads a blasphemous name. The beast that I saw was like a leopard. His feet were like the feet of a bear, his mouth like the mouth of a lion. So that takes us back to Daniel, doesn't it? Daniel 7, those animals that represent the empires. And the dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. When did the dragon give him his power, his throne, and great authority? Back in chapter 12, in verse 9, the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old, called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. So the Antichrist, for the first 3.5 years, acts deceitfully. Now he's going to be incarnated by the greatest deceiver of all, Satan. He was cast to the earth. His angels were cast out with him. Now heaven rejoices in verse 10, but not the earth. Woe, verse 12. Rejoice, heavens. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you having great wrath, because he knows he has a short time. That short time is 42 months. Time times half a time, 1,260 days, 3.5 years. Now he's confined to the earth. No more access to heaven to accuse the saints. He embodies this man of sin, as it says in 13:2. How does the dragon give him his power? Because the dragon is cast down to the earth, and he somehow, as an imitation Christ, as an imitation God the Father and God the Son, he embodies or incarnates this man. Takes complete control over it. It's the same time that one of his heads, as it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed. And because of that event, see, they can't see Satan embodying him, but they can see him dying and resurrecting. And something about that event, along with Satan embodying him, he changes from an Antichrist to the Antichrist, full of the power of Satan. And it happens right here. And that's what gives him now the power that he thought he had early. He thought he had the power earlier in Daniel 11. He thought he had the power in Daniel 11:30. But he found out he did not yet have the power he thought he had. He was turned back. But in 11:31, he has the power to break the covenant and commit the abomination of desolation. How does he have the power now? Well, he has a death and resurrection event, and Satan's embodying him now. He's a different man. And now he's unlike any man who's ever lived. So 11:31 is it's another anchor verse. And I tie it back to Jeremiah 37. This is the time of Jacob's trouble. This is when the great tribulation begins. If you want to go ahead and skip to 12:1 of Daniel, at that time, which is just a recap of chapter 11. At that time, Michael shall stand up, the great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people. There shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time. And at that time, your people shall be delivered. Yeah, they're going to be delivered after 2/3 of them are killed. And the other third has to go off into the wilderness and be protected by God. So it's not like they're going to be delivered not experiencing any death or pain, but they're going to be delivered. When it's all over, they're still going to be there, is the point. When does this great tribulation begin? Back in 11:31. So the rest of the chapter is talking about the last 3.5 years. And I give the verses in Matthew that describes the same thing. Jesus said, when you see the abomination, desolation, then shall there be great tribulation, such as there never was. Revelation 7:14 talks about the great tribulation also. So back to Daniel 11:31. Those who do, for 32, those who do wickedly against the covenant, he shall corrupt with flattery. So he's going to be getting more and more people on his side. My own personal opinion is that this death and resurrection event happens because he tries to destroy Israel and recapture Jerusalem, and somehow the Jews assassinate him. I think that's going to be how it works out. But because they were involved in killing him, it's going to turn more of the world against them. Those who do wickedly against the covenant, he shall corrupt with flattery, but the people who know their God. Okay, here's where the saints come in. Not Israel, but the saints, church saints. The people who know their God shall be strong, carry out great exploits. There's a lot to be said on this, but not only is there great tribulation and great deception in the middle, I like to also say there's great grace. To the same level that the deception increases and the tribulation increases, God's grace to the saints will increase proportionately. So even in the face of the beginning of the Great Tribulation, when this man becomes a wild animal, he becomes like Saul of Tarsus on a world stage, destroying anyone that he's against. The people who know their God shall be strong and carry out great exploits. That doesn't mean they're going to be conquering him. They'll conquer him the same way the three Hebrew children conquered Nebuchadnezzar. We will not bow down to you, even if it means our death. And in many cases, it will mean their death. Those of the people who understand, it's the same people. Those who know their God are those of the people who understand. And that's that Hebrew word masculine that I've been talking about. Those who are wise, those who understand, those who know, those who, don't you think just what we're studying, if we're alive when the abomination of desolation happens, don't you think that we will understand what's going on? And don't you think that God's grace will be sufficient to the need, and we will be, like I like to say, as bold as lions? We won't care if we are killed. What does that matter? We get to go be with the Lord. We won't care. At that point, we won't care. Revelation 12 and 10 and 11, they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb, by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives to the death. I really think it will be, the Bible talks about there'll be a great falling away. 2 Thessalonians 2:3. Okay, we like to talk about that. Okay, people are going to fall away from the truth. Okay, that's true. What's going to trigger that? This same event. A line will be drawn. You're going to have to make up your mind clearly, one way or the other. And so many are going to fall away because in many cases they never had it in the first place. It was on their lips, but not in their heart. There's another falling away. It's a good one. Those of the people who understand shall instruct many, yet for many days they shall fall. But not falling away from the truth, falling in martyrdom. You're going to fall one way. Everyone who claims to be a saint is going to fall. Some are going to fall away, some are going to fall in death. A handful are going to make it through alive. But they shall fall by sword and flame, by captivity and plundering. Now, when they fall, they shall be aided with a little help, but many shall join them by intrigue. So there's just going to be deceit all over the place, intrigue. You really don't know who's your friend, who's your enemy. It's just going to be really a tough time. Some of those of understanding shall fall. But what's the result? To refine them, purge them, and make them white. until the time of the end, because it is still for the appointed time. This is a part of the tribulation that I think is glorious, and a lot of people don't understand. Part of the purpose of the last 3.5 years is to prepare what is left of the church to be a bride adorned for her husband. Now, it doesn't mean people who've already died through the centuries won't qualify, but I really believe God wants a purified bride still alive on the earth before he comes. And I think the church will be as close to the description of Ephesians 25 as any time in our history during that last 3.5 years. So part of the purpose of the tribulation is to refine and purge and make white the saints until the time of the end, because it is still for an appointed time. The king shall do according to his own will. He shall exalt, I got to read quick. Magnify himself above every god, shall speak blasphemies against the God of God, shall prosper till the wrath, there's the wrath of God, has been accomplished. For what has been determined shall be done. God determined it. He thinks he's working it out. God's working it out. He shall regard neither the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any God. See, he's embodied by Satan. He's going to be unlike any man who's ever lived. We try to, what do all these mean? It just means he's not going to be a normal human being. He shall magnify himself above them all. He's just embodied by Satan. He's going to be out of control. He's going to be full of himself. But in their place, he shall honor a God of fortresses, a God which his fathers did not know. He shall honor with gold and silver, precious stones, pleasant things. Thus he shall act against the strongest fortress with a foreign God, whatever that means, which he shall acknowledge and advance its glory. That may be the image that is set up. The false prophet in Revelation 13 sets up an image of the beast that talks, and people are forced to bow down to it, worship it. This may be the God that is no one ever knew. It's a new one. He shall acknowledge, advance its glory, shall cause them to rule over many, divide the land for gain. At the time of the end, the king of the south. So they've had enough of him, shall attack him. See, he's not going to have like this complete control over the world. He's a regional power with worldwide influence. But there's going to be nations don't like what he's doing, and they're going to try to figure out a way to stop him. The king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, chariots, horsemen, many ships. He shall enter the countries, overwhelm them, and pass through, because he has the power of Satan directly with him. He shall also enter the glorious land, Israel, Jerusalem. Many countries shall be overthrown. Why Jerusalem? Because it's the city of God. It's the city of David, the city of Christ, city of Melchizedek. It's the holy city. And he wants Jerusalem to be his capital because he is an imitation counterfeit Christ. He's trying to do what Satan did as Lucifer, to be like God, meaning he wanted the place of Jesus in the Father's eyes. And the Father wouldn't give it to him and cast him out. But he still wants it. And now he's trying to do it by sinful, deceitful power, evil. He's wanting to take what belongs to Christ. But these shall escape from his hand, Edom, Moab, and the prominent people of Ammon, because that's Jordan today, which is probably where the wilderness is that God's protecting his people down there in the southeast of Israel, on the other side of the Jordan and south. He shall stretch out his hand against the countries. The land of Egypt shall not escape. He shall have power of the treasures of gold and silver, all the precious things of Egypt. Also the Libyans and Ethiopians shall follow at his heels. But news from the east. Okay, now there's others. Is this Russia? Is this China? Is this Iran? India? Revelation talks about a 200 million man army from the east. The kings of the river Euphrates is dried up to make way for the kings of the east. In a Revelation, that's down toward the end of the 7 years. So this is where we are here. So news from the east and the north. So evidently, it's one of those things where he's so out of control that he's gone too far, that he's ruining the world economy and everything, even though with the mark of the beast, the world went along with it for a while. But it's evident that he's gone too far. Shall trouble him, therefore he shall go out with great fury to destroy and annihilate many. And he shall plant the tents of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain, the Jerusalem area. And that's where he is in Revelation 19, when the heaven is opened and Christ comes back on his white horse and grabs hold of him and casts him into the lake of fire. Yet he shall come to his end, and no one will help him. So chapter 12, verse 1 is kind of a recap of what we just read, a summary statement. And the thing that we want to point out that will lead us into our next session and the trying to deal with the third column, what happens at the end. That may take a couple of sessions. The one thing I want to point out, just as we close this session, is that the tribulation that such has never been in 12:1 leads directly to 12:2 and the resurrection of the saints. So there clearly is in Daniel, that's one reason why Jesus kept saying, go read Daniel, you'll find out a lot, is that Daniel describes what I think the whole Bible describes, a single resurrection of saints at the end of the tribulation. Now, Daniel 12:2 is given those who hold to a pre-tribulation rapture, especially, has really caused problems for them. So many of them have come up with the solution that the resurrection of Old Testament saints only are at the end of the tribulation. The resurrection of New Testament saints are at the beginning of the tribulation. You have an alarm set for 8 o'clock too, Gary?
My wife's home.
Oh, okay. My alarm just went off. So I think I'm going to end that. That's a good transition passage. Maybe next session we'll start with Daniel 12:1 and 2. And we'll try to work through this third column and we'll spend a couple of sessions on what happens at the very end. Be able to close the year talking about the glorious return of Christ. I wore all black tonight because I knew I'd be talking about the Antichrist, that dark, ugly figure. But if you agree with me that verse 21 through 45 is all about him, it's the single longest passage in the Bible that talks about him, and it carries us all the way through the 7 years. So if you're going to be talking about this general subject, you're going to be talking a lot about this vile, despicable, deceitful person we call the Antichrist. And yet God makes clear at the end of verse 45, he shall come to his end. And by the time he is killed, no one, it doesn't say no one can help him. It says no one will help him. He's burned so many bridges and destroyed so many people and countries and economies and all that, that by the time he is killed or captured by Christ, thrown in the lake of fire, the world, even this evil world is going to be sick of it. Now, we haven't even talked about where the 7 seals and the 7 trumpets and the 7 bowls of wrath fit into all this. So we'll eventually get there. There's a lot to talk about on that. So I'll stop